You asked, and I'm going to answer. My name's Kyle Mau. I'm the founder and owner here at HireUA, and in today's video, it's going to be a bit of an off-topic and a very serious one, and I'm going to talk about what it was like leaving Ukraine back in February of 2022. I want to start off just by simply saying that my situation is very different than many people in Ukraine who are still there. I want to just obviously be sensitive of that I've been out of the country now for a year and a half, and there's a lot of people who are unable to leave, like many men in the country. There's just a lot of people who's, couldn't necessarily just up their life and leave. And those people, deserve the condolences and the sympathy over myself. That said, I am going to tell the story because a lot of people have asked me like what it was like and kind of what it was like to be in a situation like that. Maybe it's helpful. Maybe obviously it's an interesting story. It's a horrible story, but potentially take this as a lesson of sorts that if you're in a situation like this, like what to do and what not to do. First things first, February 2022, obviously everything had kind of been building up. There'd been troops on the border of Belarus, and a lot of just troops gathered right on the Ukrainian border, and it looked like something was going to happen. And my family and I, it was just my wife, my dog, and myself at the time. My wife was pregnant actually, only about 6-7 weeks along. But yeah, we obviously could have left. We had the means to do it. We could have, but we didn't. So, Kyiv was home. So basically kind of leading up to all of it, I had sort of, I don't want to say prepared, but I was feeling like maybe something obviously wasn't right. So I had a pretty good stash of like food available and water and just a few other basic necessities. That was all stashed away just in case we ever needed it. But that kind of all went out the door when that first day happened. Whatever the morning of February 24th, 2022, about 7 a.m. I woke up and just something was not right. Like I heard something in the distance, and then my wife basically shook me awake and was like, Kyle, wake up. And it was kind of at that moment that I heard the air raid sirens. Like I came to my full senses and I heard the sirens going off, which were very faint actually from inside of our apartment. So it was like really hard to hear. It could have easily been mistaken for like a police or a fire truck, but it's actually pretty distinctive once you kind of focus and wake up and get going. So obviously heard those air raid sirens and was just like, oh crap. The next thing I did was I looked at my phone, and I had hundreds of messages, like, family, friends, just so many messages that were coming into my phone at that point. So the first things first was I messaged like my parents back, obviously the most important people in my life. And I just sent them a message back and said, hey, I'm up, I'm acting, but I don't know what I'm doing quite yet. I'm getting a hold of the situation, but I'm alive and well. So next thing after that was obviously then to go with my wife, and we moved from our apartment that was in the city center of Kyiv, which if you want to check out a video about kind of what life was like, there's a video there. You can check it out, basically life in Kyiv and other things about living in Ukraine. And we moved out to the suburbs where her parents were, which, argument was basically, okay, if something big is going to happen, I'd rather be, removed a little bit from the situation, not be in the very center. Because we lived, by a lot of monuments, a lot of government buildings, we were just right in the thick of the action. So that was like first step. Basically at that point, my father-in-law came and picked us up because I never owned a car in Europe. I never really wanted to own a car in Europe. So he came and picked us up. I mean, at that point, the lines to the gas station were just crazy. We're talking hundreds of cars at this gas station with like 4 pumps of people just filling up their tanks. At that point, you start to realize like, oh boy, people are panicking. I took everything out of the apartment that I possibly could. Basically, obviously I knew we could be waiting out in the cold if we were going to leave. So I shoved, all these thermal shirts and blankets and everything else in my suitcase, a couple jugs of water, as much of the supplies as we could. And we just piled it all into the car with the dog, and off we went. Obviously, then we got out to the suburbs and nothing really happened there. Obviously, you're just on your phone there scrolling the news all day, but nothing happened for the rest of the day. I even went on a podcast, I think. Yeah, I went on a podcast that night because I had a few people. Obviously, I was in Ukraine and I was posting about it on social media, so I got invited to podcasts. I think I had a few glasses of scotch and I went on some podcasts, and that was really about it. It was just a lot of communicating, obviously, to my family and friends. And, obviously I had a lot of friends still in Ukraine. I would say at least a dozen of us Westerners still in Ukraine, like, thinking it wasn't going to happen. Yeah, just coordinating with them, like, okay, guys, like, what are we going to do? Who's got access to what? Like, what is everybody's plan? And at the end of the day, it all kind of went up in flames, literally, because about 4 o'clock in the morning, something fell out of the sky. So all night, outside of my wife's parents' window, there was this tram that would go by, and it would go like, it sounded like a whoosh. Like it would go like, and then it would kind of like click because it was like turning one way or it would go over this certain part of the track. So that whoosh though always sound like a plane. Like it really did. It fooled me a couple of times. So finally I heard like a whoosh, and then I didn't hear the click. And then I heard the big boom. And I don't know exactly what it was. I believe some sort of like drone got shot out of the sky, but an apartment roughly a mile, actually less than a mile, about a kilometer, so a little over half a mile from where we were sleeping was like, you know, the whole wall of it destroyed. I don't know if anyone actually passed from that, but I mean, it was uninhabitable, at least probably 10 units, you know, a 6-story building, just one side of it just destroyed. And the whole window lit up, you know, bright orange. And I mean, the whole just building shook. And I was like, oh crap, this is the end. I really did think that for a split second. So after that, it was like, okay, what do we do? And my wife, you know, 7 weeks pregnant, was like, let's go to the basement. Let's just hide there. And I was kind of at that point thinking, if this is it, like I'm gonna go on the top floor of this building, the 15th floor. I'm not gonna hide in the basement. Like if something's gonna happen, you know, nothing is gonna save me in the basement. So I'm gonna stay here. And then I was like, forget it, we're going. And I just said, you know, go get the car, we'll pack up. And that was it. So we got in the car, we loaded up everything that we could, you know, anything that I could potentially barter with. Like I had a couple nice bottles of scotch, and I was like throwing everything that could be bartered in. Like, you know, I'm just thinking like if some guy who's really bored, like, you know, wants a drink of whiskey, maybe he'll trade me whiskey for water. Like, you know, some people would do that in that situation, or, you know, just anything else that I could potentially trade if it came to it. Made sure I had lots of cash. Thankfully, I was already pretty well stocked up with that. And we got in the car, and that was probably about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, give or take. And I took the wheel. Absolutely no one out there except for the tanks that were rolling up and down the street. But I tell you this, I must have run like 100 red lights in the span of 10 minutes, just flying, you know, and we're talking like a city, right, where there's always traffic, and like the speed limit's probably 40 to 50 miles an hour in most cases, and I'm going like 70, just flying through all these lights. And I knew like once we got out of a certain point that it would probably be fine. So the goal was basically to get out of the city limits and get to the highway, and there it's just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So that's what we did. And it turns out like one of the bridges that we crossed out of the city was like, you know, a day later it had fallen apart. Like you couldn't cross it. It got destroyed. Basically, once we cleared the city limit, I felt a lot better about things, but obviously still just a very long journey ahead of us. So after that, out on the normal highway, flying along, you know, some people are driving slow, but there's a lot of people who are just, you know, we've got our foot to the gas, you know, just cruising 80, 85, you know, picking it up at other points too when it's more open. Probably a couple hours in, we hit the first like traffic jam where it's just, you know, cars just stop. Just there's not enough room on the road. They're doing checkpoints. We saw some fighter jets going above us, Ukrainian ones, obviously. And basically it was just getting all the way there. So then at the end of that first day, again, we left at 5 o'clock in the morning, and about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, we pulled into the queue to cross the border, which at that point, I believe we were probably 7 to 10 miles, like 10 to 15 kilometers away from the actual border itself. That's how long the line was. So we knew at that point, like, we're obviously, you know, camping out for the night in the car. And it's February in Ukraine, so it's cold. Temperatures are freezing. Thankfully not frigid, but you know, it's cold. Obviously keeping an eye on the gas, keeping an eye on our water, our supplies, and everything else kind of just in that situation. So we camped out through the first night, and obviously weren't expecting it to move very fast, and we just took turns at the wheel, basically just not taking turns at the wheel, but you know, every 10 minutes you turn the car on and move forward a little bit. And that was really about it. The next day, pretty much more of the same. And it was the day after that too, more of the same. I can't remember how many nights we camped out. I think it was 2 total nights. And then we finally, we're getting to the point, I was like, okay, we just need to get across. And basically there were 2 lines. So there was like a pedestrian line and a car line. And my father-in-law couldn't leave the country, so he was taking the car back. But we had the car, and it was quite a long hike, you know, and we had luggage, we had the dog. It wasn't something like, oh, we're going to walk 5 miles, you know, pregnant wife, dog, bags. It just wasn't on the card. So the goal was just to get the car as far forward as we could. And also bearing in mind, we didn't know exactly how long it would take to actually cross the border on foot. You know, we'd heard rumors that it could be 12, 15-hour wait there too. The plan became get out on the second, I believe it was like after our second night of staying in the car, it was get up and going as early as possible where there's as much daylight and warm weather as possible, obviously pregnant wife. Don't want her sitting out in the cold all night, ideally, and get as far forward as we can and take the rest of the way on foot. So that's what we did. And people were not happy at us because they thought we were cutting to the front of the line in our car, and we had to keep stopping and explaining, like, no, like the car is staying, this person is staying, they are only going on foot. So we snuck by a lot of cars like at 4 a.m. and drove just as far forward as we possibly could. And that got us to within about a mile of where like pedestrians were. So again, drove the car as far forward as we could, packed everything up or got everything out of the car, said goodbye, and then walked the rest of the way going forward up to the border. At the border, it was pretty chaotic too. Just a lot of people. There wasn't really like a real firm line. I think we got there about 6:30, maybe 6. And it was just kind of chaos. Like, there wasn't really a structured line. There was, food everywhere, hot drinks, but everyone was like very unhappy with the way things were going. They were clearly just not organized. About 3 hours later, they started getting organized and we were able to get in line. And obviously then you're just kind of fighting through the throngs of people trying to all get out. Thankfully, we were in a good situation. Like, for example, if I'd just been an unmarried guy, I would have been in the line with all the other foreign men trying to get out of the country. But because we were married, we had the dog, and we had proof of the pregnancy, I was able to go through, a little bit faster with the citizens line, so to speak. I can't remember all the times at that point, but then we finally, got to the Ukrainian border. They checked everything. Obviously, they're looking at me mostly that I'm not a Ukrainian man because they can't leave the country. And they let us through, went to the other side, went to the Polish border. Again, probably just another hour wait. And then we were through. We were crossed, and that was quite a feeling, so to speak. Obviously just relief. And then of course the next battle is like, what do you do next? And we had hotel reservations in the first town kind of into the city or into the country of Poland. At that point, you were bused from that final border point into a small town where they had like a whole camp set up, like you could sleep. They had gyms set up, warehouses, and you could basically get rides anywhere in the country, or basically they'd help you get on a train to the right place, whatever it was going to be. So you just got out there and you looked for someone with a sign to your city that you wanted to go to, which was in our case like 40 minutes away. We just found a nice Polish friends that had a car, and they, the price was basically, we'll drive you, take you wherever you want. We just want to know what happened, and we want to know like if we should be worried. Like they just wanted the real intel. So that was it. They picked us up, they drove us to the hotel, and obviously they were very friendly. We told them everything that we could, and probably we were already falling asleep at that point in the back of the car. The dog certainly was. And then we checked into the hotel. I went and ordered a Pizza Hut pizza because there was a Pizza Hut in the mall next to the hotel, and that was the best pizza I've ever had in my life. And I had a couple beers with it, and I couldn't sleep though. Like we were there and checked in by like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and like I couldn't get to sleep. And I even called my parents, told them the whole story, even though I'd been obviously pretty much awake for 72 hours. I don't even know how long it was at that point. I dozed a little bit here and there in the car, but not much. And that was really it. Quite the story. And obviously it's going to be very, very interesting to tell my daughter, who was, not born yet at the time, but my wife was pregnant with her. It'd be a very interesting story to tell her, like, well, we made you in Ukraine, and then obviously moved across the world, and then we now moved back across the world to Europe again. But quite an adventure, not one I want to repeat, ideally. And again, it's quite a story to tell. I don't want to be the one who gets your sympathy though, because there's a lot of people that are in a lot worse situations than I am, right? So I just want to like really make that clear again, that, people want to know what happened. Like people ask me all the time, like, what was it like? And this is kind of the nutshell of it. There was a lot more details that went into all of it, just from arguing with people on the road to dealing with the checkpoints. There was a lot of other details that were involved in the whole process, but I don't feel that it's necessarily a fit for the video. That said, I'm glad to be able to share this story. I'm obviously glad that my family and I are in good health and good spirits. Obviously, it's been a year and a half, so we've kind of moved on to a certain extent, but it's not me who has had a hard time of it. There's a lot of people that have had it worse. So just keep them in your thoughts and keep that in mind, moving forward. So that said, people do ask, how can I help? And obviously, we place Ukrainians with business owners. So if you are a business owner and you do want a way to help and you need help in your business, obviously we'd love to place a Ukrainian with you and be able to give them a good job. Anyways, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it provided some insight into the whole situation. And of course, subscribe to the channel and like the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.